Well, the good news is we've had a nice dump of rain, which may help put some of the bushfires out. The bad news is there's some people over on the coast who've just had a really bad day. Welcome to summer in Australia, where you have bushfires one week and flash flooding the next. Okay, back to talking about Janie's dog. So this is actually the third video in a series where I'm talking about Janie's dog. This is all prompted by the latest audio that Sunny released from Hayley Ferdinand, who is Malaya's step or half sister. I was certain that she was only a stepsister, but I was told by Sunny that she's a half sister and that her and Hayden are full brother and sister. I still don't think that sounds right. I would like clarification from someone close to the family. So I've done 2 videos already talking about Janie's dog because I realised when I started collecting clips that there was actually a heck of a lot of stuff to talk about. So the first video that I did, I was talking about Janie's desperate need to protect her dog. For some reason, she was determined not to allow the RCMP into the RV on the Saturday when Belinda was there. According to Janie, Constable Mason never asked her to remove her dog from the RV. But that seems highly unlikely because she would have heard the dog barking before she even got near the RV. So she would have known that there was a dog in the RV. And if it was barking as incessantly as it was when Belinda was there, then yes, the first thing that Constable Mason would have done would be to ask Janie to remove her dog. Because no sane person is going to walk into an RV with a dog that is barking incessantly, because you're going to be concerned that the dog is going to be territorial. But according to Janie, Constable Mason never gave her the opportunity to remove her dog. She just spouted off at her, or whatever Janie's terms were, told her she was impeding the investigation and said she was going to get a warrant. And then Janie turns around and apparently takes her dog out of the RV so that searchers can go in and look inside her RV instead. Now, I question whether that actually happened. First of all, because searchers had a job to do. They weren't there to search the property in terms of investigate. They weren't going to tear things apart inside her RV. Maybe they would have popped their head inside the door after Janie removed her dog, but that would be all they would be able to do. Not just because they weren't law enforcement, so it wasn't their job, and their job was to be searching and trying to find these children, but also because of the legal implications. Had they gone in and searched Janie's RV and found anything, it wouldn't stand up as evidence in court. And Janie could simply claim that, well, they didn't really have authority. They're not law enforcement. They didn't have any warrant or anything. And that wasn't in the RV. They must have planted it. These are seasoned searchers. They know the rules. So I find it highly unlikely that they would have actually set foot inside the RV. At the most, they would have popped their heads in, and that's about all. This was the Saturday. This was the day after the children went missing. So you could pretty much by that stage rule out the possibility that they were hiding somewhere inside Janie's RV. So we have Janie being extremely difficult on the Saturday, not allowing the RCMP into her RV, claiming that she was concerned her dog might get hurt, or that her dog might react because it doesn't like strangers. But then the following day you have Constable Mason turning up and Janie's like, yeah, just let me put my boots on and I'll get the dog out of the RV for you. Now, I've gone into that in far more depth in the video that I did a few days ago, so I will provide the link for that in the description for this video if you haven't seen it, because I'm not going to go and recap it all, or we'll be here all day. But certainly there seems to have been a shift on the Saturday. Janie was determined that nobody was going to, or nobody from the RCMP was going to get inside her RV. And then on the Sunday when they returned, she's happy to take her dog out. And you could say, well, they came back with a warrant. She had no choice. But they had already told her on the Saturday that they were going to come back with a warrant. So why not just then and there say, okay, well, let me just get my dog and I'll remove the dog. And as Belinda said, there were places on the property, there were empty sheds on the property where she could have taken the dog. In yesterday's video, I spoke about the barking issue. On one hand, we have a description of a dog that is so reactive that it barked non-stop on the Saturday when Belinda was there. You have Janie trying to give the impression that this dog is reactive, but a lot of the time she forgets to add in to her narrative that the dog had barked. Not only that, you have her telling us about how her dog has this major anxiety issue to the point where it's losing fur, and that the vet had told her that while she was stressed, her dog would be stressed. Well, that sounds like a very, very different issue from a dog that is reactive and barking at everything. Again, I would recommend going and watching the video that I put out yesterday about that, because, again, we'd be here all day if I tried to go through all that here at the beginning of this video. So that brings us to the question, were there two dogs? And of course, the big question that comes from that is, if the dog in the CBC interview is not the dog that was there on the Saturday, what's going on? Where's the dog that was there on the Saturday? Were both dogs on the property at the same time? Or was there only the big dog on the property and this little dog has come from somewhere else? So I'm going to jump in with what was said by Belinda and what was said by Hayley.
That I do know the dog barked the whole time we were there. The dog just barked continuously. So I could tell the dog was a big dog. I couldn't quite see its face, but my sister and my daughter were close enough to the trailer and they stated that it was a big dog.
So we have Belinda, who is utterly confident that the sound of the bark from that dog was the sound of a big dog barking. Now, I mentioned in yesterday's video when I was talking about the barking that, yes, sometimes you get some dogs that are that sort of medium-sized looking dog who have a bigger dog in their breeding, and they may have that big bark that makes them sound like a bigger dog. But generally those dogs, what sets them apart is they have the boof head, the big head from the bigger breed of dog. That little thing of Janie's didn't have a very big head. But not only that, you have Belinda's sister and Chelsea both saying to Belinda, yeah, we saw the dog in the window and it was a big dog. So I decided I would go straight to the source, and I emailed Chelsea and asked for her thoughts on the dog. So I'm going to read this to you. Yes, I could see a larger dog in Janie's trailer. It had its front paws up on the dash and head in the window. It had bigger jaws like a pit bull type dog. But I couldn't make out the colour due to the reflection in the glass on the windshield. I thought it looked like it may have had white and brown, but can't be sure. I only remember so well because I heard Janie say that she didn't want anyone in her trailer because of her dog. I did think everyone's behaviour was off that day and acting really weird, but at the time I sympathised with Janie because I'm an animal lover. I understood her position because it did sound like a larger dog, and I know people misunderstand big dogs. So I could see her being protective, and I would be too. But then she didn't simply choose to move the dog and decided to go off with Justin. So that's a new bit of information there. So she's basically left the dog in the RV and headed off with Justin, telling Malaya and someone else not to let anyone into her trailer. I felt kind of sorry for the dog at the time because it seemed really upset and worked up. I was thinking, poor thing, all these strangers you can't just come meet. Let's face it, old Tucker here was not remotely concerned about the cameraman or the reporter being there outside the RV. He certainly wasn't in any way worked up. It certainly sounds like not only did Chelsea see a different dog, but that different dog behaved very differently to this dog that we saw in the CBC interview.
Okay, so about the dog part, I thought Janie's dog was like a beige brown. That dog that she brought out of the camper in the CTV video was black and white, wasn't it? I'm almost certain her dog was beige. So that dog that she brought out of the camper the day for her CTV news interview was not her dog. So that's the weird part that I've been thinking the whole time.
So the dog that I recall seeing the day of the search was beige. Now, the one in the CTV clip or whatever it was that she did, that did not look like the same dog.
So it certainly sounds like Chelsea and Hayley saw the same dog, and the dog that they saw was not the dog that was in the CBC interview. Sounds like it was a very different dog. Now, I should probably clarify something from yesterday's video. I played a clip where Belinda said that she went there on the Monday after Malaya left with her sister and spoke to Daniel, and that when she got there, she saw Janie, and Janie was like, "Who are you?" And Daniel said, "That's Cody's mum." Belinda has told me that actually when she went there on that Monday, on the 5th, she saw Justin there, she saw Logan there, she didn't see Janie. I don't know if Janie was there or inside somewhere, or if Janie wasn't there at all. But she didn't see Janie then. That was the day that she saw Justin sitting in the driveway crying. She didn't hear the dog that Monday when she went there. She also went back on around the 17th, I believe. And when she went back on the 17th, she also didn't hear the dog. She did see Janie on that day. Now, Belinda was curious about the dog, and she asked Daniel specifically about the dog. So I'm going to play that clip because I think there's something significant in this clip.
But I had asked Daniel when I was there anyway. That was not their thought. When I was there, I asked Daniel what kind of a dog his mum had. Because I said, if somebody come into the property and took the kids, I said, wouldn't your mum's dog bark? Because it barked all day Saturday. It would stop barking. And he said, well, that's the thing. He said, mum's dog didn't bark and it didn't wake her up.
So she specifically asked Daniel, what sort of dog does your mum have? Because shouldn't that dog have barked if something happened, if someone came onto the property? Daniel didn't say what the dog was. He simply jumped on the last part of what she was asking and said, well, that's the thing. The dog didn't bark and the dog didn't wake her up. That actually contradicts what Janie said, because she claims that her dog woke her up because it heard the children outside, or one version of that anyway. But the key thing here is that Belinda has specifically identified the dog that was barking all day on Saturday. Daniel would know exactly which dog that was. So when asked, what sort of dog does your mum have? He didn't give that answer. He said, yeah, it was funny that the dog didn't bark and it didn't wake mum up. Classic Daniel strategy of not answering the real question. Now, clearly he's answered Belinda at some point in time, because the next clip you'll hear her say that he told her it was a Yorkie type of dog. I'd love to know verbatim how that conversation went down. Was he stalling by saying, yeah, well, you know, it is a bit odd that the dog didn't bark, while he was trying to figure out what answer to give Belinda, and then came out with the Yorkie cross thing? Or did Belinda have to just really push the issue to try and get an answer out of him?
How many dogs were on that property, do you know? Because I know Daniel told me her dog was like a Yorkie mix, but the dog I heard Saturday was a really big dog.
No, he's not really big. He's about a foot high at the spine, and he's one dog that I know of that I saw there, and he looks like a little bigger Yorkie, but he's kind of a mutt too. I think he's probably got not a purebred or anything. But
Does
no,
Justin have a dog? Because this dog was big.
So this was a conversation between Belinda and Durwood on Sunny's channel, and she's asked him outright what sort of, or how many dogs were on the property. And she said, Daniel told me her dog was a Yorkie mix, but the dog I heard was big. Now, I know based on the audio that we've just heard that Durwood would like us to all think he's a knight in shining armour right now. But I have many, many questions for him still. And his response to Belinda here was to not give an answer to her initial question. He didn't actually say how many dogs were on the property. He straight away latched onto Daniel's description of the dog. So without addressing the question of how many dogs were on the property, he straight away went to, no, he's not really big, he's about a foot high. He's one dog that I know of I saw there. He's not saying he's the only dog that is on the property. He's saying he's one dog that I know of, that I saw there. That to me sounds like actually he did see another dog there whenever it was that he was there. And he runs with the Yorkie description and says, well, you know, he's kind of a mutt too. Now, I just want to say, here in Australia, if we refer to a Yorkie, we're talking about a Yorkshire Terrier. They're white dogs. They're actually a lot smaller than that dog of Janie's, and they have a longer coat. So to me, looking at that dog, I certainly wouldn't say that I thought there was any Yorkie in there. Possibly a bit of Scotty in there. But if you look at photos of German hunting dogs, that's what he looks like. Of course, the breed isn't really relevant because that doesn't change the fact that that's not the dog that Belinda and Hayley both believe they saw. So Belinda got straight to the point again and asked, well, does Justin have a dog? And she emphasises yet again that the dog that was there on the Saturday was a big dog. So the conversation went off at a tangent at that point, and Belinda didn't get her answer from Durwood at that point in time. So she came back to it a little while later.
Darren,
Yeah. Does Justin own a dog? I know I seen a big dog. Well, I didn't particularly see the dog. I heard the dog. And I know what a small dog sounds like compared to a large dog. But my daughter seen the dog and my sister seen the dog. They only seen the dog's head because it was up at the window.
So Belinda doubles down on that this dog in the RV was a big dog. She heard it, it sounded like a big dog, and Chelsea and her sister saw the dog, and to them it appeared to be a big dog. Now, I should have included Durwood's answer here, but basically his answer was, I don't know. And then he did the, well, see, if everyone was talking, we'd know about the dogs. So on top of referring to the dog that we saw in the CTV interview as being one dog that he knows of, when he said we would know about the dogs, you'll notice he said it in plural. And he also didn't say we'd know if there was another dog. He said the dogs, like the dogs that exist. So I wouldn't be surprised if Durwood did actually know about the other dog, but was just being evasive. He's said himself that he's got no problems with outright lying. Anyway, I'm going to move on to a bunch of statements that have been made, mostly by Janie, that I think definitely do point us in the direction of there being at least two dogs. I say at least because I was reading comments from yesterday's video, and someone mentioned the rumour that Daniel had a big dog like a husky or a malamute that was an old dog. which in actual fact is not the dog that Justin owns, but I will get to that at the end of the video. And certainly the description from Chaucer, and I think the description from Hayley, would actually point us away from it being a Malamute or a Husky. Huskies are white, Malamutes are predominantly white, to the best of my knowledge. And I mean, let's be real, Malamutes and Huskies are fluffy dogs. So had Chaucer or Hayley noticed the dog was super fluffy, I think they probably would have mentioned it.
My dog reacts. My dog tells me when there's people in the yard. My dog tells me when the kids are outside. My dog is really sensitive because he's so used to being all alone here for the last for whatever the kids showed up here 2 years ago. My dog has been used to quietness. When Jack and Lily moved in here, my dog got more sensitive to sounds because of the kids yelling, screaming. So yes, my dog is very sensitive to Lily's scream and Jack screaming or talking.
There is a reason why I'm replaying this audio. I know I played it, I think, in yesterday's video, and you're probably thinking, how does this relate to there being two different dogs? Well, it relates to what I'm discussing in this video, let's put it that way. So here she's saying that her dog reacts. It's used to being alone on the property there. It's very sensitive and it doesn't like the sound of Lily's voice. Now, like I've already mentioned, the dog in the CBC interview, that dog is not a reactive dog. I think we can all agree on that. It definitely sounds here like Janie is describing a dog that is different, a completely different dog to this quiet black thing that trotted along behind her during the interview.
Anyone has a dog when they go through experience like my dog has when there's nobody around, and then all of a sudden everybody have all these people come into your yard and your dog is just like, wow. Like, it's just like putting someone that has been isolated from people for a long time and putting them in a crowd. It's just like they're just overwhelmed with all this here emotion, like they don't know how to control themselves.
So when you put those two statements back to back, it paints a slightly alarming picture. On one hand, she's saying her dog reacts to Lily's scream. Her dog is used to the quiet life, and then Jack and Lily came along and it's just not used to them. And so it reacts to them. And then in this part, she's trying to give an excuse for not allowing Constable Mason into the RV. So she's not actually referring to Lily and Jack in this particular instance. So I don't think she's realised the connection between what she's saying here and what she's already said about Lily and Jack. It is a typical Janie thing where all her things seem to get muddled up into different stories. So she talks about her dog being very sensitive and it's not used to having all these people around. And with all these people coming and going from the property, it gets overstimulated and it doesn't know how to control itself. I find that really alarming, hearing her say that as an excuse for not allowing Constable Mason into the RV, and not realising that this could very well apply to Lily and Jack. If the dog becomes overstimulated around Lily and Jack, is she saying that it can't control itself around them? Now, this is lower down in my list of theories in terms of what may have occurred with Lily and Jack in the driveway. But the things she's saying here are alarming because they could point to this dog attacking the children in the driveway. I guess it's possible that some sort of incident could have occurred, and if Daniel was going and doing a bit of mathematical stuff, maybe he completely lost the plot and took it out on the children. Maybe one of the children was injured and he took it out on the other child for not for being a part of it, I don't know. But it's certainly alarming to me for her to be saying on one hand that her dog is so reactive around Lily, and then to turn around and say that when, if a dog becomes overstimulated, it doesn't know how to control itself. The other possibility here is that if there were 2 dogs on the property and somehow they got in with Lily and Jack, or they got let out, then pack mentality can set in. I've seen that on farms here in Australia, where super quiet domestic dogs get out and get onto someone's sheep property. And it just takes one of those dogs to have an aggressive nature and to go after the sheep, and suddenly you have this pack thing going on. And they move quickly. They react quickly. I've seen it firsthand. A pair of dogs in a mob of sheep can cause serious carnage in a really short amount of time. I can only speak to the area where I used to live, but in the area where I used to live, that was a rural area, there were a number of farmers who, if they spotted a dog on their property, they would shoot first, ask questions later. Could one dog on its own be an issue? Definitely. I had a friend years and years ago who had a pit bull that was the sweetest, kindest dog on the planet. And he doted on her children. He was about the same age as her youngest child. So he grew up with her children. And she had this sort of a rooster that, if the children were outside playing, would fly at them and try and attack them. And when the kids went down the road to catch the bus, the school bus of a morning, they'd have to be really quick or the rooster would go at them. And one afternoon, her daughter was riding her bike in the yard out the front of the house. And this rooster went at her daughter with its spurs aiming straight for her daughter's face. And her pit bull came out of nowhere and got that rooster by the neck and finished it off just like that. So it is not inconceivable that a single large dog could have caused some serious, possibly fatal injuries to those children.
Sank that low on a chat that I was in that they thought they had it all over that Facebook that my dog killed the kids. And that really hurt me because my dog is gentle. But when it comes to their place where they're trying to protect, that is their ground and they protect it.
So she's saying here she's upset because people on Facebook suggested that her dog might have done that thing with the children. And she's saying it hurt her because her dog is gentle. So at that point in time, the subject here is her dog. People suggested that her dog did this thing to the children, and she's upset because her dog is gentle. But did you notice, straight after that, the subject changes. Now she's talking about they in terms of a dog. But when it comes to their ground that they're trying to protect, that is their ground and they protect it. She's switched from talking about her quiet, gentle dog to a dog that is aggressive. She's no longer talking about her own dog in the second part of this statement. That makes me think that the black dog that we saw in the CBC interview may well be Janie's dog. And the dog that Belinda saw and the dog that Hayley saw on the Saturday, or when the search was on, is not Janie's dog, but it was on the property. Either that or Janie had 2 dogs. Because she's describing this dog as gentle. She describes this dog as being an anxious dog that reacts to her anxiety and loses its coat because it's reacting to her anxiety. But at the same time, she's talking about a dog that is reactive. A dog that, if overstimulated, is going to lose control. And then here you have her referring to her dog as being gentle. And then she switches to they and their, talking about a dog becoming aggressive and territorial. If she was still talking about her dog, I would expect to hear her say that, you know, when it comes to his ground, then he's trying to protect that and he will protect it. Definitely sounds like she's talking about two different dogs here.
So my dog is locked in the RV. The reason why I do that is my dog is kind of a, if he gets out and he gets out of the fence or anything, my dog likes to go for a little walk. Just like probably like most dogs, go for a little walk in the woods, because ever since I had my dog, he's been fenced up, because I got him from a lady in New Glasgow, and she had him tied up all the time in town. So when I got him, I built the fence out back so he would have a place to run, and he's been fenced up ever since I got him. Because if you have a dog that's tied up all the time and he gets loose or fenced up all the time, of course when they get loose they're going to want to wander for a little while. And he got away one other time on me.
Okay, so she's talking about her dog having originally come from a lady in New Glasgow who had him tied up all the time. Now, when you have a dog that's been tied up all the time, you would expect to see that that dog has developed some not so good behaviours. So I find it interesting that this dog that we saw on the CBC interview, when Janie opened the door of her RV, it just hopped out, jumped down the steps, and just went over to the gate to check out the cameraman. But it wasn't in any rush to go anywhere. It wasn't trying to gain its freedom like you would expect from a dog that has spent part of its life constantly tied up. So I found that very interesting that she said this. Is this a different dog that was from New Glasgow? And she's saying that, you know, her dog likes to go off for a bit of a wander in the woods because it was constantly tied up before she got it. My first question is, why would you need to tie that little black thing up if that's the dog that she's referring to? Seems like a pretty docile dog, and it seems like it was quite happy just following Janie. It doesn't seem like it would be problematic in terms of jumping up on people or showing aggression. So it seems a little odd that this lady had this dog tied up if this is the same dog. That said, this could give us a clue as to why Janie didn't want the RCMP going into that RV. If the dog that was in the RV was a dog that was prone to wander, then I could imagine her concern over wanting to avoid that dog getting out and taking off into the woods. I was looking at the dog bylaws for Pictou County a little while ago, and rangers have quite a lot of power there. So it is actually in the bylaws that a dog that persistently wanders, and I believe they had, like, if it's caught wandering like 3 times or something, that dog can be euthanized. If a dog is deemed to be aggressive, they have the power to euthanize the dog. It doesn't have to have attacked someone, it can just be deemed aggressive. So Janie's describing a dog that is territorial, it is reactive, and it's a wanderer. So maybe her concern was over this dog potentially getting out. Maybe this dog is known to rangers and maybe it was on its last chance. Maybe that's why she got it from the lady in New Glasgow. Maybe she was concerned if it got out and it was seen as being aggressive, that it might end up having to be euthanised. Or maybe there is another reason why she did not want anyone near that dog. I'm just going to play the last part of that clip again though. Listen carefully.
And he got away one other time on me.
Now, you probably caught the full story of this in Janie's audio, where she's talking about the dog going missing and she went searching for ages and she finally found him. But the key thing here is that she has admitted that her dog has gotten out. She said, he got away one other time on me. She's talking in general terms about, well, you know, she has to have a dog fenced in because otherwise he takes off. But in her mind, she is thinking of a specific incident, something that she doesn't tell her listeners. But she finishes by saying, he got away one other time. So it sounds like quite potentially this dog may have been involved somehow with whatever happened with Lily and Jack. Because it seems like she may well be admitting here that the dog got out.
And to tell you the truth, if I was a child that was in a fence and got out of it and was running, yes, I would be excited to go. And those kids are always excited when they're running around because they're always screaming and hollering. Believe me, I know. I observed it for 2 years out back here.
This statement has always bothered me because of the wording of it. But when you put it back to back with her comment about the dog getting out and taking off, it's even more alarming. But she says, if I was a child that was in a fence and got out of it and was running, the way she talks about a child in a fence makes it sound like the child was penned up like an animal, like a dog. And I mean, we know that backyard wasn't properly fenced in. So it wasn't like they were in a fence. They were kind of in a yard, but they weren't fenced in. So the wording of this, to me, is a little bit alarming. Because on one hand, she's referring to Lily and Jack and saying, giving this hypothetical, if I was a child in a fence and I got out and I was running, I would be, you know, she's giving this picture of running with excitement. After talking about her dog, if it gets out, it takes off. And then she's referring to Lily's scream. Lily's scream, which we know triggers the dog. She's spoken before about Jack letting her chickens out. What if Jack let her dog out?
If the kids were out in the yard by themselves, let's just say, and they get out of the gate and were running up the driveway, I would know, or I would think the kids would be saying, especially Lily, come on, Jackie, let's go, Jackie. So that's another thing I can't understand is if I never heard the kids running. If the kids were running out of the yard, out of the gate, out of the fence, my dog would have still been barking.
Now, I've mentioned multiple times how Janie muddles up her narratives. So, for instance, the raking the yard where she saw Malaya standing, but making it all sound like it all happened at the same time. So she gives this hypothetical if the kids were in the yard and they were unsupervised. Well, that's an interesting hypothetical because we know, according to her narrative, on Thursday evening, after she finished fencing, she went in for supper and she doesn't know what time the children went inside or when they went to bed. So she's suggesting here that they were outside unsupervised. Daniel, Well, apparently he helped Janie with the fence, but then after that, who knows what he did. He doesn't describe having any encounter with the children until midnight when he flicks the light on. So it seems that quite possibly Jack and Lily were outside unsupervised on the Thursday evening. And she talks about if they get out of the gate and were running, well, there's no gate. Or there wasn't when Jack and Lily went missing. So I always found it interesting that she referred to them getting out of the gate, because that would require there to be a gate for them to open and get out of. But maybe that's not the yard that she's referring to. And maybe she's not specifically referring to Lily and Jack getting out of the gate. She claimed she would know because she would hear Lily saying, "Come on, Jackie." And she also claims that, the dog would still be barking. But before she says, the dog would still be barking, she says, "I never heard the kids running." So she's actually admitting that they did get out there in the driveway and were running, in my opinion. And I've covered this in another video. This is a bit of a segue from the dog, so I'll try and keep it brief. But then she says, if the kids were running out of the yard, out of the as in gate, out of the fence, so she's trying to correct herself. She can't quite come up with the right word for the children running out of the backyard area. And I always found it really odd that she was stumbling over her words like this. And then she's like, "My dog would have still been barking." If you look at this in the context of the children potentially opening the gate to her yard and letting the dog out, that would explain her bumbling over yard and gate and all that stuff. That would explain her saying that her dog got away from her one other time. Could it be that maybe the kids were accustomed to that black dog that we saw, Tucker, that little thing, and there was a different dog in the yard, and they went to say hello and maybe the dog jumped out, or the gate wasn't properly shut and the dog got out? And this is the reactive dog that Janie has described.
And I'll tell you something else. My dog, when I put him out in the pen where Lily and Jack was, that's all my dog does is go to the door to see where the kids are, because he can't understand why the kids are not here anymore, because he's so used to hearing them out here, and he's like, where are the kids? Like, I don't hear them anymore. I don't see them anymore. So my dog has gone through a really rough time, just like I have.
Now, this always sounded like a really odd comment to me, because she spent so much time telling everyone how much her dog disliked Jack and Lily, how much her dog was triggered by Jack and Lily, and how her dog had lived the quiet life before they came along, and it had become stressful for her dog because they made so much noise. And now she's turning around and saying when she puts him out in the pen where Lily and Jack were, he's looking for them because he's so used to them being out there and he's used to hearing them. And this dog is missing Lily and Jack. There's no way that this reactive dog that she's described is going to be pining for these children that it detested. Many, many, many years ago, I used to have a dog that was a Kelpie cross of some sort. And she was a really, really lively dog, and she was a reactive dog. She was fine around me, but I had to encourage people to discourage her from jumping up if they came to my place, because she just got too excited. And for a period of time there, I had these neighbours next door to me that were right rotten twats. And their driveway ran up the side of my fence line. And what they would do, the kids would get out there on their bikes, they would get to the bottom of the driveway and they would bang on the fence. and they had something in their hands and they would run it along the fence as they pedalled their bikes along the fence. And my dog Maggie used to just go berserk. She hated it. And she would follow the sound of them up the fence line. And because she was part Kelpie, she was full of energy. She would literally do speckies off the fence. And for those of you who don't speak Australian, speckies, basically what I mean by that is that while she was running, she would leap at the fence with all her paws, wouldn't quite reach the top of the fence, so she would bounce off the fence with her paws, land on the ground and keep running. I was terrified that one day she was actually going to go over the fence. And this is a 5-foot fence. When they finally moved out, possibly evicted, my dog did not miss them one bit. She didn't go sitting at the fence line hoping that they'd come back and upset her again. If her dog was reactive, if it was triggered by Lily's scream, then it wouldn't be pining for those children. That to me says this is another example of Janie talking about two different dogs here. She claims she never let her dog near Lily and Jack because she didn't think they'd been around animals, and Lily screamed when she met the dog. There's definitely two dogs here that Janie is talking about. A dog is only going to fret over someone being gone if it's someone that they have a connection with.
And Mason came here either Sunday morning. I might have said Monday on my interview. I will correct myself. But she came here Sunday morning. I was over in the big trailer. I stayed the night over there Saturday night with Daniel. And she came. I seen her walking in the driveway. I opened the back door and asked her, yes. She said, would you please remove your dog so we can search your trailer? I said, give me a minute to put my boots on. I come out. I took my dog out. They come in here and they searched the place again.
So on the Saturday, she got herself worked up into this absolute tizzy that she was in tears and saying that she wouldn't allow Constable Mason into the RV. She was worried about her dog. And yet now she's talking about the Sunday like, yeah, no problems, I'll just go and get the dog out for you. It's a complete about face from the day before. We know the day after, when Belinda went there, she didn't hear the dog barking. I'm wondering if on that Sunday when Constable Mason turned up to search her RV, that the dog that was in there on the Saturday, the one that was barking incessantly, was no longer on the property. I also find it really interesting that she stayed overnight in the trailer. Did she leave the dog locked in the RV overnight? Was the dog out in the yard when Constable Mason turned up? Because I can't understand if she was in the trailer overnight why she would leave her dog in the RV. But the other side of that is Daniel is a grown man. He's 33. Or was 33 when the children went missing. I don't know when his birthday is. Why would she need to stay overnight in the trailer with him? If she lived in the RV, all her stuff would be in the RV. It would be more comfortable for her to just hang out with Daniel till bedtime and then head back up to the RV and go to bed in her own bed with her own things and her own dog. Was she going to sleep in Daniel's bed with him? So I just find it really, really odd that she stayed in the trailer overnight on the Saturday night. And I'll put a pin in that and come back to it.
We were talking about the dog. You had stated that the dog is really triggered.
When Lily does that screaming?
Yeah, mainly by Lily screaming and is triggered by the kids.
Yes, because, well, what animal isn't triggered by animals to run when they run around screaming?
Wouldn't the dog have barked if somebody walked on the property?
I'm not 100% sure. I can never hear the dog when I get there. the dog's always my grandmother. My aunt always has the dog in her RV. So if I'm not paying attention for the dog, I ain't listening for the dog. So, but the whole time that I knew the dog, I never really paid attention to the dog because I'm not really a dog person. So
Okay.
I would say hi to it, but like I'm not personally going there listening to see if the dog's barking at me. Like, you know what I mean? I'm not listening for it, and I'm not an animal person myself. So
First of all, personally, I would never ever have anything to do with someone who told me they were not an animal person. That says to me that they're not the sort of person that I would want to know. If you hadn't already guessed by now, my dogs are the world to me. So for someone to say they're not an animal person, especially to say they're not a dog person, yeah, I just don't have time for them whatsoever. So this is that audio where we hear her talking about what animal isn't triggered by animals being loud and screaming. So she's referring to Lily and Jack as animals, which I find really disgusting. But here she's saying the dog is really triggered by the kids. But then when she's asked would the dog bark if there was someone around, someone was on the property, she says she doesn't know. She says, I never hear the dog when I get there. Well, Belinda could hear the dog from the moment she got onto that property. So how is it that Logan can't hear the dog? And she's saying, well, the dog's always in the RV and she's not specifically listening out for the dog because, you know, she doesn't like animals. Well, there's a few problems with that. First of all, the dog was in the RV on the Saturday and Belinda and everyone else heard it. It didn't stop barking and they noticed that it didn't stop barking. It was an incessant barking. But her saying she's not a dog person, she's not an animal person, so she wasn't listening for the barking, that would actually make her more likely to be aware of the barking. This is someone who's clearly not sympathetic towards animals, who clearly doesn't have a dog of her own. So a dog barking incessantly would drive her nuts. If that dog that Belinda heard was on the property any time that Logan went there, she would be very much aware of that dog and she would definitely be very much aware of its barking. So her telling this fog woman that no, she's not aware of it, she doesn't pay attention, to me says that whatever the dog is that Janie normally has with her is not a barker. Which suggests to me that the dog that we saw in the CBC interview is perhaps the dog that Janie owns. And the dog that was there on the Saturday belongs to somebody else. I think by now we can be pretty certain that there are two different dogs here. One dog is the dog that we saw in the CBC interview. The other dog is the dog that Chelsea saw, that her aunt saw, and that Hayley saw, and the dog that Belinda heard barking, and she said it sounded like a big dog. But why then was that dog in the RV on the Saturday? Now, I'll admit I've never been much of a follower of Dolly Vision, but I was going back over some of his episodes from early on in this case because I wanted to go back over the Darren Geddes audio because I'm missing some bits. And I came across this call-in on one of the videos where Dingbat called in a little bit later on. And what was interesting was that this guy claims to know Daniel extremely well. He said he was in middle school with Daniel, and he says that he lived around Pleasant Valley, which interestingly enough is really close to Darren Geddes' house. I haven't done a comparison yet with the voices, but I'm questioning whether this could have actually been Jordan ringing in. But it definitely sounds, from listening to the entire audio, and I will put that out at a later date because I'm actually going to do a discussion on this call-in, because there's some interesting things that comes out from this person. But what stood out to me was what he said at the end of the phone call. He makes a statement and then he starts to backtrack on that statement. He tries to scurry away from it. And then he says that he's got to go. So I'm going to play that bit of audio for you. Now, I will just preface this by saying, yes, Dolly did confirm the phone number was a Nova Scotia phone number, and when you listen to the accent, it certainly sounds like it's someone from the area. Not only that, but given that this was the 17th of June, this guy seems to be very well informed about Daniel and his family, so I do believe that it is someone who knows Daniel. So, having established that, I just found this to be rather interesting.
Like I said, I don't live too
Did
far
you
away,
ever
and I
meet?
know
Did you ever meet his brother?
his brother, Justin?
I mean, I
Oh,
don't.
yeah, Justin.
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, I have met Justin before, and he's a great guy. I like Justin. He's a phenomenal guy. I don't have anything against him. As far as I know, he lives on the property. But
Well,
other than that,
I'm hearing rumors that he doesn't live on the property. Some rumors say he does. Some rumors say he don't. So,
he doesn't. He only goes there temporarily. He lives. I'm trying to remember where he lives right now. He lives near up by Mount Tom. He doesn't even live there. Neither does the mother. The mother doesn't even live in the back shed.
well, that's what people are saying, that she lives in that camper that's behind the house.
She hasn't been there. She's not there. That's what I've been told.
Well, I mean, on his last news interview, he said he's there by himself. So, but at one point, I guess she was there, but right now, I guess she's not. She left for some reason.
Oh, maybe she left for a certain reason, but as far as I know, neither of them lived in that back shed.
Oh, so I've been hearing different. I heard the brother lived down the road a ways, that he has two brothers. One has a couple kids and the other one don't. And that the mother was living in the trailer, but she gave the trailer to Daniel and Malaya, and she was living in the back.
Okay.
That's what I heard. I mean, I'm not local. You may have heard something different than me, but I'm just telling you what I've heard in the situation.
Exactly.
Because right now it's a lot of new rumors and speculation. So
it's a lot of rumors and speculation. Yeah, I understand that.
Okay.
But anyway, I'll end the call now. If you want to call me back, I can give you some more news or.
Okay. All right. Well, you be good.
News.
So, like I said, there are a lot of things that this guy said before this that made me think that he actually did know Daniel extremely well and he knew what the go was. And here he is saying that actually at that point in time, Justin was living in the RV and Janie wasn't staying on the property. Now, Malaya said to Belinda that Justin was living there, although he said they live in the RV out the back, referring to Janie and Justin. But what if it was a situation where normally Janie's in the RV, but Justin was having problems with his marriage, and we've heard that directly from Logan, and he was staying at the property temporarily, and maybe Janie wasn't even staying there at that point in time. Do you remember in a lot of Durwood's audio, he kept saying Janie wasn't meant to be there. Janie wasn't there. Janie wasn't meant to be there. I think statements like that, there's usually a bit of truth in them. So was Janie staying somewhere else? Maybe that early morning call from her brother Ron was because someone had contacted him for help with the situation on the property, And maybe they hadn't been able to get hold of Janie and he was ringing her and saying things have gone south. Maybe Belinda was not far off the mark at all when she asked Durwood, does Justin have a dog? We know that Justin's got a dog. And maybe she was on the right track there. Maybe the dog that she heard, the dog that Chelsea saw, the dog that Hayley saw, was Justin's dog because he was staying in the RV. And maybe that's the reason Janie didn't want them going in there, because she's made this statement that it's her property. She doesn't want Justin involved. They've all gone out of their way to keep Justin out of this, which is really, really curious. Okay, I have one more bit of audio from Belinda, and then I'm going to try and wrap this up.
And she was going on saying no, she didn't want them to look at something. I can't remember what it was. It was a cupboard or something. And she said about her dog, that she didn't want her dog getting hurt.
So this is Justin's dog, who coincidentally is called Lily. She's a pit bull cross, and she could match the description given by Chelsea and Hayley. I'll come back to her in a moment. But Belinda also said, Janie said she didn't want them looking in her cupboards, or in a cupboard. And then in her Facebook audio, on one hand Janie claims there's nothing in the cupboard, and another time she claims there is no cupboard. If the cupboard thing is true, is it possible that yes, Justin was staying in the RV and for some reason she didn't want the RCMP to know that he was staying in there? Or could it be that Daniel moved things from the house into her RV thinking, well, they're not going to look in there, they're not going to go in there because they think the children have wandered off into the woods, and Janie was having a panic because she had stuff in there that might have got her arrested. If this is a dog that they saw in the RV, that would certainly suggest that Justin was actually staying in the RV at that point in time and not at home with his wife. But then that raises the question of when Belinda arrived on the Saturday and she heard the lady saying, it's okay, Mum, they don't blame you. That sounds like it had to have been Justin's wife. But certainly if this is the dog that was in the RV, she would have been far better off being left at home rather than being cooped up in a teeny tiny RV, which would certainly suggest that she was already there when the children were reported missing. She was there with Justin because Justin was on the property, not at home. Now, there were rumours going around quite some time back, which I honestly hadn't paid a lot of attention to, because at that point in time there were a lot of rumours going around, and I suspect they were ones that were started by Daniel's family trying to steer the narrative. One story I'd heard was that Justin's dog was an old dog and therefore completely harmless. I'd also heard, and I completely forgot until I saw a comment in yesterday's video, I'd heard a claim that Justin's dog was a cross between was a Malamute or a Husky or something like that, and that was the old dog. Now, the person that reminded me of that has a really good memory for these things, so I trust her memory on this. And what she said was that it was said that Justin's dog was a Malamute Husky or something like that, and that was the old dog, and that was Justin's current dog, and that this dog was now living with Earl, and it was Earl's dog. I do remember that particular story came out around the time that Belinda was asking about Justin's dog. What is Justin's dog? Because she saw this big dog. And that was the story that seemed to be circulating around the time Belinda was asking about the dog. That Justin had this big husky thing, and that it was old and harmless. Now, I don't know why the need to start this rumour that the dog was old and harmless, and why the need to tell people that's what his dog was. Because I can tell you right now, Justin still has this dog. So the dog that Earl is describing here sounds a lot like the dog that people are claiming was Justin's dog, and that Justin had given his pit bull to Earl, and Justin had this Malamute thing. So this is an older post. Obviously, this is from 5 years ago. And I'll blow up the picture in half a moment. But his comment was, she's about 95 pounds and a big baby. Cats even terrorise her. That's why I got Bro Cat here, as Cat is bad. So when Justin moved, Lily left, and I got left with Bro. Now, with no punctuation, it's really, really hard to decipher that. But we know that cats aren't 95 pounds. In kilograms, that's 43 kilograms. That's a damn big dog. But what we can decipher from this is he does say, when Justin moved, Lily left, and I got left with Bro. What's interesting is the comment down the bottom also, no dog, even Lily being part pit bull, will fight a mad cat. Okay, now that I blow the picture up, I'm guessing he was referring to the cat when he claimed the cat was about 95 pounds and he was just over-exaggerating. That is one fierce-looking cat. So it seems that this rumour of Justin having an old dog that was a husky or a Malamute or something is incorrect. Because you can see here from Earl's Facebook page that Justin took Lily with him when he left. Presumably that is when he got married or got with his partner, whatever their situation is. And he took Lily with him. I'm not aware of the origins of the Malamute story, where that comes from. I would put money on it coming from Daniel. I wouldn't be surprised if this picture was the inspiration for that. Now, when we talk about that CBC interview, it just seems so staged. All the new decking, all the new steps, the fence was beautifully finished. The woodshed was all stained. And then you have her parading the dog out of the RV. This dog's coming out so very nicely, hopping down the steps, walking along next to Janie, and then going up to the gate and checking out the cameraman. It just seems like it was all done for the benefit of the camera. There certainly wasn't a dog sitting there in the front windscreen barking at people. It was all very quiet when that interview was being done. We have 4 different people giving an account of a dog that sounds very different to that little black dog that Janie paraded for the camera with the CBC interview. You have Janie's own niece saying, oh, she doesn't know if the dog barks or not. Well, you'd notice it. A dog that's an incessant barker, especially if you don't like animals, you would notice that dog barking non-stop when you went there. So it seems like there definitely was a different dog in that RV on that Saturday. Whether the little black dog was in there as well, who knows? But there was definitely a second dog. Where's that dog now? Whose dog is it? Was it Justin's dog? Was Justin staying in the RV and that's why the dog was in there? Or did Janie have a different dog? And then she adopted this black dog afterwards. I have a lot of questions. There's a lot that I can't answer. But I do very much believe that the dog that was there on the Saturday is not the dog that we saw on the CBC interview. So I'm going to finish it there. I know I haven't given a solid resolution or anything, but my goal here is to just spark conversation. So hopefully someone will listen to this and it'll give them some more thoughts, some more things to talk about. So on that note, thanks for listening. If you're new to my channel, please subscribe. Also, please hit that like button. Let's get these videos out there into the algorithm. And please leave a comment below. Thank you, and I'll catch you in the next one.